Almost had the hiccups.
Oh,
About a half hour ago. Like the timing.
so we're recording. How are you? I'm John Tilley with Paul Whitcomb. We are the Underworld, Kings, Killers, and Clowns. We have Jason Tandozza. Tandozza is correct, right?
Randazzo, actually.
Tandozza was there. We'll talk to him in a minute. As Paul or Cam will tell you at Killer, Kings, and Clowns, we try to keep an even keel. So we do tell stories about bad guys because that's primarily what we do. But we're also very fair in interviewing police officers, lawmen. We give them a fair shake. We've had 2 so far, including your friend, FBI agent Jack Garcia.
Garcia, yep.
But we try to keep it fair. No one, and when we do tell a story of bad guys, good guys, even with the bad guys, we try to get to the heart of the matter. Telling stories, life isn't black and white. So we try to look a little bit deeper when we talk to these former gangsters. And there's a story. Everybody has a story. The key is when you have your story, and it was made from, as Emerson said, the thing that lights your fire, or what the Army later stole from him, be all you can be. So in Jason, we have a fellow who found a thing that lit his fire, law enforcement, and made him all he can be, a good cop. I hear your friend Jack Garcia speaks well of you, and I'm sure.
That's good to hear.
And has taken every day bits of life from his life as a child in Brooklyn.
Yes.
I was going to go with Queens because I'm not sure.
Well, I was born in Brooklyn, but raised in Queens, actually.
So raised in Queens. The stories are a hodgepodge. Watch me. I'm becoming both the guest and the host. So I'll give it in a second. But and then he found police work and moved on to the FBI, and that's what we're going to discuss. Hi, Jason.
Hi, how are you?
Got your book with you?
Yes, I do. I have it right here, if you can see it.
And it is called Just Another Day, and it's by Page Publishing, and it's available now.
Yes, just out the last 2 months.
What's your book about?
Well, pretty much it all started as just writing my memoirs, more for posterity's sake, more for me, just to remember some stories. It all began when I used to tell my cousin's former husband some stories about some friends of mine in the neighborhood growing up, and he was from Long Island. And after I heard some of the stories of some of the people I grew up with, he was like, you know, it sounds like a different world to me. And I'm like, really? It's that different? And I'm like, I'm kind of surprised. I mean, when you grow up and all you know is your own neighborhood, you think that's what everybody knows. And it happened that, I guess, you know, the neighborhood I grew up in, Richmond Hill, Queens, which bordered on Ozone Park, had a collection of interesting individuals.
One of the people you knew, Jason, was, how's it pronounced, Paul? Elite?
A-Light, actually, John A-Light.
Yeah. You knew him as a kid.
Yeah, we played Little League Baseball together.
Maybe Paul or somebody could explain. He was I really don't know his background. He was with the Gambino crime family, right?
Yeah, he was actually at one point in the late 80s, John Gotti Jr.'s so-called right-hand man. So
you played baseball with the guy?
Yeah, we played baseball together. His father coached one team in the league that his brother Jimmy was on, and his uncle Al coached our team. And yeah, I mean, you know, when you grow up with people, well, we were just kids, so I mean, who knows, who could foretell what was ahead of us? But I mean, at the time, we were just good friends, and he batted third, I batted cleanup. His sister would come down and watch the games. Like I said, his uncle Fred was our coach, most soft-spoken, mild-mannered guy I know. And that was it. We just grew up, and we were on all-star teams together. And I played for Richmond Hill High School's baseball team. He played for one of our rivals, Franklin K. Lane. And I mean, everybody on my team knew him, respected him. He was, I mean, he grew up, as he got older, he worked out more. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did you know him in your career as an FBI agent? Or
Well, yeah, that came to pass later on. We did cross paths first haphazardly in the streets when I was a cop in New York. And he was in Woodhaven. He grew up in Woodhaven, lived in Woodhaven until he moved out to New Jersey once he started getting more into his game. But his parents always lived in Woodhaven, so he would always come back to visit him. And we'd come across each other on Jamaica Avenue, and, you know, how's your mom doing? To me, how your parents doing to him? How's how's your sister and brother? And that was it. We going on our ways. And there were times where we'd see each other here and there. But that was it at that time when I was a cop. I mean, you know, I was just a street cop. I worked in Harlem and Washington Heights. And back in the 80s, those two areas were the heist and homicides, the 3-4, which I worked on a task force, but we worked up in the 3-4 constantly, led the city in homicides for a number of years in the late 80s. So, yeah, I was not an investigator at the time, so I really had no reason to come upon him officially. It wasn't until later on when I joined the FBI in 1990 that we started to cross paths a little more often, you could say. And it was fortunate because at the time that I joined the FBI, I was on what you call a truck hijacking squad. And we were located in a building on Queens Boulevard in Rego Park at the time. And it just so happened that, well, the way it's divided up with organized crime as far as investigations are concerned in New York, you have the 5 families, and you have squads that are dedicated to each family. And there's what we call Squad C16 was a Gambino squad. They just happened to be in the same building as I was. So I had fortunately was able to meet the guys in that squad and get to know some of them, including the case agent by the name of George Gabriel, who had John Gotti Sr.'s case. So thereby, since I was able to meet the agents and know them, whenever I saw John on the street haphazardly, what have you, just to kind of cover myself, I would always tell them of any interaction I had with them, because I didn't want anybody to think that anything was going on that might seem nefarious, which none of my dealings with him ever were. And that was it. And through the years, he would be in the paper. I'd see about things he's doing, and I was on my side of the fence. Fortunately, I was kind of glad about it. I was never assigned to the Gambino squad. I worked truck hijacking squad for a long period of time, and then I was on a bank robbery squad till I retired. And I just never wanted to be in a position to have to actually try and actively recruit somebody who I knew from my childhood days. Yeah. I mean, obviously I would help out in whatever way I could, which I did later on when John did become a witness for the government and testified against John Gotti Jr. And up until that time and during that time, whatever I could do to help him, help the government, the agents on the squad, I would gladly do. But I just didn't want to be in a position to be actively working my own friend, if you will.
You know, an observation, I wanted to ask you 2 things. When you go on to the FBI, do you have to tell them, by the way, I grew up with Bobby the Butcher or whatever the case?
It's kind of funny. When I joined, after I believe I had passed most of the tests, whatever psychological, written test, the interview. And I remember one day I had to sit down with an agent, and I assume it was because of my last name. I mean, my father was not even though he grew up, he was born and grew up in Brooklyn. He was never a part of any kind of organized crime. So I guess it was just because of my last name. One day I was sat down in an office, and an agent had asked me, "I'm going to read you a bunch of names and establishments, and I want you to let me know if you're familiar with any of them." And John's name didn't come up with it. He read me a bunch of other places that some I never even heard of, maybe a few faintly, but nothing like blasted out at me where I could say, "Oh yeah, no, I'm familiar with that person," or "I've been to that bar or that restaurant," or what have you. So that was the end of it. And I just never thought. I just want to say real quick, I just never thought to bring it up until I met the Gambino agents, because it was never going to be something I was going to compromise me. So I had no problem with it.
The FBI wasn't asking from the point of view of, hey, there's an Italian, let's pull him in here, make sure he's honest, but rather from the point of view is, if he knows this place or that guy, maybe we could use him as an operative in that, or?
I never even thought of it that way. I just thought it more in the integrity of the bureaus. I mean, I was not even brand new. I wasn't even on the job yet. So, I mean, it's possible, but it's hard in my mind thinking that they were like grooming me for possibly being an undercover person later on. But that could have been one of the things. Maybe it's something I never thought about before.
Well, I think a lot of it is, Paul, it's subconscious. I mean, I don't think now we have to go back. What year was this? 1980 something?
Well, I was a police officer from 84 to 90, and I joined the FBI April in 1990.
So before things became so incredibly politically correct, I think people just brought these things to the forefront. And I know there was a big stink in the New Haven FBI office, which apparently is a large office, I think. And the walls were lined with photos of all Italian people. And of course, you know, the FBI has a wide reach. They do more than, and unfortunately for them, New Haven has a huge Italian population. So that caused a problem. But I think past those days. But I think it was a legitimate question. Did they question you because, look, we got an Italian guy here, let's make sure he's on the up and up? But it was probably a combination, as you say, a combination of both. I wanted to tell you, you know, when you say you grew up is how you see the world, Paul grew up in the Midwest, right?
Right.
I grew up not far from Jason, and I was shocked when I moved out of the Northeast and moved down closer to the South. Catholics are not the minority in America, and not everybody, not everybody has a long, funny sounding last name. And, you know, I was shocked when I came to live in Virginia that people really have sort of Anglo, most, you know, they don't end in vowels. So it's an interesting observation. It's how we grow to see the world. You know?
No, absolutely. It's true.
The question I have for you is that most of the FBI agents that I know personally and professionally, when they get into the bureau, they get posted somewhere away from home, at least for a while. And how did you avoid that?
Actually, I didn't. Out of the academy, my first office was in California.
Okay.
And I know earlier in the Hoover years, we were told that's what the preference was. And from what I heard, that was the preference because they wanted to get people, agents, away from their home field because they may have ties to some kind of criminal enterprise or what have you, or even just maybe bad people. So from what I understand, in Hoover's mind, he wanted to take agents from the east and west, west to east, north and south, and vice versa.
Right.
When I came through, I guess that wasn't a prevalent thought in the FBI's mind anymore. And basically, well, at the time, because the agents weren't getting paid a lot of money, and was pretty much a national scaled wage, not many people wanted to work in New York. And most people aren't from New York. If you're from out west, in the Midwest, I guess you probably hear a lot of stories and things about New York where you're like, if I can avoid going there, all the better. So New York historically, excuse me, I don't know anymore, probably still has some, but historically always had a hard time staffing the office. And the time I came through, they pretty much said to the people, the 30, I think I had 32 people, well, 31, one dropped out, but they pretty much told the class, anybody interested in going to New York, we're going to give you a list before the transfer unit makes selections. And you put down your top 5 officers on your list, and they'll see what they can do. They'll see if they can accommodate you. And they said, if you put New York number 1, number 2, number 5, you're going to go to New York. So I was at a time in my life where I was leaving the police department. I'd been in New York all my life. I was 27 years old. I was still living with mom. At the time I was a cop, I just couldn't justify, because we live in an apartment in Richmond Hill, and I just couldn't justify getting my own apartment and just paying 2 rents. So I was with my mother, and I figured, well, if I got in the FBI, one good thing is if I get out of New York, go somewhere else, now I can finally justify paying 2 rents. So when the lists came out, or should I say the sheets came out, I wanted to stay on the East Coast. So I was like, all right, let me put down some locations down there. And it included big and small offices, because the FBI has 56 main offices, field offices, and then they have what they call resident agencies, which are satellite offices that surround the main office. So they said, if you want, you could put down a small office. There's an opening there, and they can slide you in. They will. So when I got my piece of paper, I put down Cocoa Beach, Florida, Daytona Beach, Florida, Tampa, Florida, figuring at least if I stay on the East Coast, at least I can get back to New York. My mother would be living alone, and I can get back and forth easy enough. So on the day we were supposed to get our orders, during lunch, my counselor comes over to me and he says, well, let me tell you, most of the people, they were able to fit, the transfer unit was able to get them generally where they wanted to be, except for you. So he was like, they don't do this often, if ever, but here's a blank sheet of paper. Put down offices, and you could still put down New York if you want, but I think your idea of getting out of there and seeing something different, finding out what's out in America isn't a bad idea. So it's like, great, how long do I have? You got till the end of lunch. Thanks. Here I have about now 50 minutes left to decide where I want to spend possibly the rest of my life. So we had a big almanac, all towns in America, went up. I opened it up, and he did tell me that there were offices, spaces at that moment open in Denver, Sacramento, and San Diego. So it's like, okay, thanks. So I went up, thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm not really looking. Denver's probably, I'd rather stay on the coast. I have family in San Diego, and I just wanted to be totally out altogether. So I'm like, all right, let me put Sacramento and see if I can see if that gets in. So I put that number 1, and then a couple others, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Give it back to them after lunch. We come back to our amphitheater style classroom, and one by one we get called up. We get an envelope. You open up the envelope, and I guess it's sort of like your draft notice. Greetings, you are going to this office. So I got Sacramento, and I was very happy about that. I was like going from a big town to, I guess, like a medium-sized city, and it was on the coast. So I was like, all right, all's good. And then when I contacted the agent out there in Sacramento, they had like each big office has an agent dedicated to bringing in the new agents and getting them a little settled. So I call them up, Joe, how you doing? And he's like, listen, he goes, I know that you got your order to come to Sacramento. We have a small office 50 miles south of Sacramento, a place called Stockton. So I'm like, Stockton? Never even heard of Stockton. He's like, yeah, we have, it's a 4-person office. They have 3 there. They have a secretary, and we'd like to send somebody there who can kind of hit the ground running. And we figure, you know, either a military or a former police officer would be perfect. So we're thinking of putting you there. I was like, Joe, it sounds like a great opportunity, but if you could do me a favor, I think I would melt away in a town called Stockton. I'm coming from a town filled with millions of people, and Sacramento is a nice drop in the population of a city where I'd be living in that I think I could deal with. If you're going to tell me I'm going to be 50 miles away in an even smaller place, this it may be a little tough for me. It's like, you know what? I understand completely, and you know, we'll see what we can do. We'll hopefully be able to accommodate you. Thank you very much, Joe. So anyway, after graduation, I drive home. I get home. I see my mother. Gives me a big kiss hello. She goes, "Oh, by the way, guy Joe from Sacramento called. He said when you come out here, come by the office and say hello, but you're on your way to Stockton." Thank you very much. So
He asked you to turn a light on because you're fading, you're disappearing.
yeah.
That's all right. There you go.
Sorry about that. I know people are going to probably start to think I'm in a wetness protection program. So
Okay. I want to remind you before to go back at some point and tell us what's the book about. How does the book follow? Just to give us a quick summation, but also
yeah, pretty much it starts with
ask you something more pertinent than more current, I should say, is not pertinent. You know, we see what's going on now in America. As a kid, I had my problem with the police. I mean, I was not a nice boy, but I never hated the cops. You know, I mean, it's their job. My job was to be a bad guy. Their job was to be the cops. But, you know, what goes on now? These little skinny punks are fighting the police, and the police really can't or won't or are terrified of doing something.
yeah.
If you hit some guy and he falls dead, all of a sudden you're in jail. I mean, there's sort of a witch hunt thing. And my understanding is, I've forgotten which police department it was, can't get recruits. It was a major police department too. Can't get recruits. I don't know if you saw that recently. And it's the same stuff. What do you tell a young guy, a young woman who wants to go on to the police or is even thinking about it? Would you say, you know what, things are really bad right now, the hell with it, go be a car mechanic, or what would you say?
Well, I actually do have friends, some who are former police officers, retired police officers, whose children are thinking of going on. A lot of them under today's climate are kind of trying to discourage them. I mean, it's an honorable job. It always has been. Besides being a professional baseball or football player, which is my first 2 dreams, this is, I guess, was number 3. And I have no regrets. The 6 years I spent on the NYPD, I mean, were invaluable experience. I got to see and meet people I never would have in my little cocoon of Richmond Hill, Queens. And I was just amazed. I mean, a lot of kids from, when I say kids, now I'm talking about college age, 20, 21. I was 21 after I graduated college and went into the police academy. And a lot of my friends went from the same neighborhood. And I mean, it was not with the prime intent, but a lot of people went because I figured, hey, it's 20 years, you got a pension at the end, good benefits. And what else are we going to do? Because not a lot of us are qualified to do a lot of things. I went for criminal justice in college. Not many of my friends went to college. So, and at the time, you can get in the police department with a high school diploma, or I think even a GED. But it was a good job, and it was a great experience, and especially for me, because going on, and Joe was right in a way about hitting the ground running. I mean, I had been in enough situations, 6 years in the police department, that there was not much that was going to surprise me anymore when I got to the FBI as far as situations, dealing with people. I was pretty much comfortable anywhere I was, where if I had just been in Richmond Hill all my life, or had gone to college and then law school, or became a CPA and then joined the FBI, obviously there was a lot of situations I would never have encountered in my experience beforehand that would have been brand new as an agent. So I always felt that that was a great foundation, those 6 years in the police department, and with the New York City Police Department, of course, that really was helped me in dealing with people and evaluating situations I was going into. And
I think that this, what we're going through now, I don't know, is an anomaly. I don't think this is
without a doubt, without a doubt.
Go for decades. This is something that has shot up. I think if young people are considering it, you know, if you qualify, it's, as you say, 20 years, which when you're young seems like the end of time, but 20 years goes by really quick, and you're an employee, you get a good pension, something you have to think about now, people. Pension, you get money, you retire, and then you get Social Security, you have a nice retirement.
And it is good if you get to the end, but that's the problem. I mean, today when you see a lot of these situations, and I mean, it's tough. The public's not making it any easier for the police officers. And I know a good deal of it has to do with the issue of mental health now, where the police have to go in and deal with people that they'll never be trained to do. I mean, you need, you know, psychological training. And even with that, when you're dealing with somebody in their house in a volatile situation, to de-escalate it, just verbally I mean, more often than not, it's not going to wind up good. And I know with a lot of these defund the police actions, where they're saying, well, we want to give the proceeds, we want to give funds to social workers and psychologists and other people to go out. I mean, to go out on these calls, I mean, you're sending people to their deaths. I mean, yes, social workers, psychologists have their importance, but that's not going to be at the point where something is going on. Obviously, if something's going on, it's a situation that's increasing to probably a violent episode. And I mean, maybe a social worker there may help, but you need the police. You can't send an armed social worker to come out to a domestic violence. Domestic violence incidents are one of the most the worst things for a cop to go to, because now you're not only dealing with usually the husband, but whatever spouse who's gotten volatile in the situation. But then once you're dealing with them, now you might have the other person, the wife, turning on you as well. And they're the worst situations, and you couldn't send somebody there without some kind of protection, just with a notepad and a pen.
Hey, Paul?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that the Los Angeles City Council disagrees with you. They voted unanimously today to create unarmed intervention teams.
Really?
Send out, just came across the wire.
Wow.
That's going to be a disaster.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just going to take one episode. Well, you shouldn't say that. Maybe it won't take one episode, but I mean, it's a recipe for disaster in my eyes. And most people in law enforcement who have dealt with these situations will say the same thing. So I guess we'll just have to see what happens.
Boy, that is a really stupid law. I can't believe an entire city would do that. Wow.
Well, it is LA.
Jason, to get in there, get it over with, and get everybody where they belong, right? I mean, it's supposed to move fast, because if you prolong these things, the chance of it blowing up is better, right? Isn't that the basis of police?
Well, I guess it depends on each situation. I mean, you want to try and de-escalate it. You want to try and build rapport with the people you're talking to bring everything, have it simmer down. And I'm sure that a person there who's kind of like an authority figure can do it more easily than somebody else who's just trying to mediate it. Because the person who's the threat that initiated having to have authorities come to this, more often than not, if they see that there's somebody from law enforcement there, it'll be a trigger to bring it down rather than somebody that they can overpower or they could abuse.
Let me go back to your book because that's important. You were a policeman in Washington Heights, right?
Yes, I was in a task force, a Manhattan North Task Force, and we patrolled from 59th Street to the top Manhattan. So that would compromise the Upper East, Upper West Sides, Central Park, Harlem, Spanish Harlem, Washington Heights.
When I was there, Washington Heights was not a nice place. I don't know what it was like when you were there, but.
Yeah, no, back then it was, like I said, the 3-4 precinct. Now it's divided up. It's so geographically big that they decided to make a precinct in the southern half, which was where a lot of the incidents were.
So it's now, I mean, when I was a boy, it was a black neighborhood. Now it's, I think,
Dominican.
Or something, right?
Dominican.
What's it like to be a white guy from further out in the borough? Boom, there you are. And what was that like for you? Was you feel?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely it's a new environment. I guess fortunately, I have a lot of compatriots who are also in the same situation because there were a lot of other officers there who also came from out. There were officers there in the police academy. I don't know if they still do, but they used to refer to guys that would come in from the suburbs, Nassau, Suffolk County, and Westchester, that would come down to the police academy. It's coming from East Cupcake. Yeah. So these were guys that were even more than me. Were in areas that they were just with people that like themselves, and they went to school, and you know, everything was you know, East Cupcake-ish, I guess. And then they come to the academy.
Your book is about it's just chapters. This was my childhood. These are some of the people. This is what it was like to grow up in well, Brook, but then Queens later on. And here's what it was like to be a patrolman in Washington Heights.
Sure, yes.
Someplace, and then you go on to what rank did you became an investigator with the police?
No, actually, I was a cop for the 6 years. I had taken the test for a sergeant, which I had done well on. So I was on the list, scheduled to be promoted. But in my mind, I mean, the sergeants were out there on patrol with us. They were doing basically the same thing. I mean, a sergeant could be active and not actually answering radio calls, but going, backing up units to a call or whatever. But he's out there, what we would call scratching our books. You'd have to see the sergeant once before lunch, once before meal, and once after meal, just to make sure you're out there and doing your job and not, as they would say, cooping somewhere.
Yeah.
But you're just doing the same thing. You're in a blue and white car, just driving around as a sergeant.
What was the most of your 6 years? What's the most memorable event that happened that you wrote about in the book?
Well, I guess the most memorable that kind of stuck out is the first segment, first chapter on my book is an incident that we had, my partner and I, it was up in Washington Heights. And as I had said, down in the southern part of Washington Heights, that was from 155th Street up to, I think, about 165th, 68th, was where a lot of the crimes, a lot of the drug activity. I mean, when I'm talking about Washington Heights, I mean, when you go down between Audubon and Amsterdam Avenues, Amsterdam to Broadway, I mean, when you're going down those side streets, it's like you're going down a canyon. It's six-story buildings, apartment buildings on both sides of the streets, and just going down a city block, tons of people. And the thing about Washington Heights that made it so, I guess, good for drug trafficking up there is because it's connected by so many bridges. So not only do you have the well-known George Washington Bridge, which connects with Jersey, but you have also bridges that connect with the Bronx, and you could have people from Westchester coming down through the Bronx over those bridges, and then you have the Triborough. Well, I'm sorry, I think it's the Robert F. Kennedy Bridge now. It used to be the Triborough Bridge that would connect from Queens.
Isn't that
There.
Bobby Kennedy? No, he got caught in a hotel in Washington, right?
Yeah, there was, when I first came out, my first 6 months, we were on foot patrol. They had what they called,
By the way, so I'm sorry.
that's all right. They had what they called neighborhood stabilization units, which meant our first 6 months, we're just going to be walking foot posts in particular precincts. And they had something called Pressure Point 2. They had one down in the Lower East Side to try and stem the drug activity. They would just flood the streets with uniformed cops. And then they decided to have a second one up in Harlem. And we were just out there, just walking foot posts. It was more for omnipresence. It was just to keep the drug dealers as much off the streets as possible, at least when we're walking by. And I guess to the drug buyers, I guess hopefully if they see a guy in uniform, maybe they'll move on or what have you. And of course, arrests were made for drug transactions. So it was to stem the drug trade that was going on up there at the time. And as you had asked about that one memorable moment, there was the time I was with my partner in the Manhattan North Task Force. We were up in Washington Heights, and he was actually, I mean, it's a real skill to notice somebody who's carrying a gun. I mean, a bad guy carrying a gun. Yeah, it's just looking at body language, how they move, how they favor a side maybe, how they might position their hands while they're walking, if they're checking something. And just as one time, we were driving down, I think it was like 158th Street, which was one of the more notorious blocks, and my partner just yelled out, "Stop," and stopped the car, and he jumped out, and the guy took off, and we started on a foot chase that ended up catching the guy with a gun. So we got a gun collar out of that incident, small automatic. Yeah, in my time with the police department, it was just running from one call to the next. It's hard to say which one stood out. I mean, it was, a number of arrests, number of backing up other units that were on the scene, that we engaged people. I mean, if you want to talk about one night that in the 6 years that stood out in my head, was the night that 2 New York City police officers were killed in the same night in 2 different places, and both happened to be up in Manhattan North. One was, I think, in the 2-4 precinct. I believe that was an undercover, narcotics undercover operation that went bad, and an officer by the name of Christopher Hoban was killed there. And the same night, another officer up in the 3-4 precinct, who happened to jump out of his car with his partner and engaged an individual who had just robbed a drug dealer in an apartment in one of the buildings there. And Steve Buzek wound up being shot and killed. So that was the one thing in the 6 years that, I mean, 2 different spots with 2 different, two completely separate incidents where New York City cops were killed.
Yeah.
Really, kind of sticks in your mind.
I need to, we need to wrap it up fairly soon, but I do want, we didn't talk much about your career in the FBI. Tell us, you went back to New York and now you're on hijacking detail primarily, right?
Yeah, well, I was after my year in California, I was able to come back. I'm sorry.
It's in the book, right?
Yeah. I was able to come back to New York, and it was when I got my orders to come back. New York is, I mean, where I was in that small office with 4 agents, it was great because you could work anything. I mean, we had bank robberies, we had fugitives. You could get a multitude of cases. You could run leads, and just so many different things because he covered everything. He's just kind of working geographically. But once we come back to New York, now you have the biggest office in the country. So rather than work things geographically, the way it works in New York is you work things according to a violation. So you'll have a bank robbery squad. At one time we had the truck hijacking squad. Back then there was a fugitive squad, which is one of the squads I started working on when I first got back. As I said, for each organized crime family has a squad. There's a whole section for white collar crime. I mean, and that's just on one side of the house. Back then, we used to have just 2 sides, criminal, and the other side was foreign counterintelligence. And at the time, I mean, unless you were heavily into that kind of, into that area, most people didn't want, especially somebody who was a cop. I'm not looking to chase after Russians or Chinese and spies. And, yeah, I mean, the one thing about that is you're not really going to get a chance to arrest many people because those investigations could take years and years. And then, as I saw in a new program that came out about the FBI, about a bunch of Russians that were rounded up back in 2005, in the end, they rounded them up and then they traded them for American spies in Russia. Yeah. So after a 10-year investigation, there was, I mean, I'm sure it's still satisfying to the agents, obviously. And I mean, some of the things you see with the way they were able to get surveillance cameras due to how they were able to get the information of meetings and such that happened so quickly in a subway tunnel or what have you, that it was just an unbelievable job.
Yeah,
they did. But like I said, you could be like just on it for months, if not years, until you finally get a result. But with the criminal division, that's where I wanted to stay in. And when I was assigned to New York, I was told I was going to a surveillance squad, and that was going to be my first assignment. And on a surveillance squad, that's what you do. Here I am in the FBI for a year, so I've had very limited investigative experience in that small office. It was very good, but it was only a year. And when I was coming back, they were like, listen, you're a native New Yorker, you're a cop, obviously you know the area, so we're going to put you on a surveillance squad. I was like, all right. I mean, if it was possible, I'd like to go to a case squad so I can learn investigations first, and then maybe go to a surveillance squad if that was possible. But I was told by the supervisor over there, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, we'll put your name back to the hat. You may get on a criminal squad. More likely than not, you're going to be going to the foreign counterintelligence. So I was like, you know what? I'll stay with the surveillance squad, which is what I did.
Is it boring to be on a surveillance? I mean, you sit there, that kind of surveillance where you sit there for...
Yeah, you sit there. And I mean, it's funny when you watch SUV or something, and you know, you see one cop sitting in the car, and then the other one comes, and it's the first thing in the morning with 2 coffees. He sits down, they talk for about 30 seconds, and all of a sudden the person that they're looking for walks up.
Yeah.
I mean, if it happens, it's as likely as an asteroid's going to hit the house across the street from you.
Yeah.
You're there for hours and hours watching. When I first got back, there was a war going on with the Colombo family,
Yeah.
and Vicarina was, I think, going against the Persicos or what have you.
Yeah.
And our job was, because they were looking for, I can't remember who it was exactly, but they were looking. Now, when I say they, I'm talking about our substance, the Colombo family squad was looking for a particular person who was hiding out somewhere. So they thought that we might find this person by following this relative. So our surveillance squad was tasked with following this relative. This relative owned a car dealership, maybe 5-6 miles from his house. Every morning, get up, see him coming out, getting in his car, driving to the dealership, going in the dealership, sit, wait, watch. Might go home for lunch, follow him back, might not, spend the day at the dealership, end of the day, drive back home, watching, and there's your day. And it was days on end. And this was my introduction to the surveillance. I mean, we were involved in some surveillances that a lot of them are very tedious, that you could just be sitting there. And then there was one day that I illustrated in my book that my team was watching some kind of drug diversion subject, not drug trafficking, but it was having to do with pharmacies, and they were doing something with the narcotics that they weren't supposed to be. So we were watching that, and it just came up that the bank robbery squad had information about 3 guys that had lined up for about 32 bank robberies, but they had identified them, but they had no evidence to get an arrest warrant. And on this particular day, they had gotten information that these guys were going to do a bank robbery that day. So my team was already assigned to the drug diversion case, and we were there. And another squad had the bank robbery surveillance. So I'm sitting there with this one. A couple, I think, a couple people got taken off over to the bank robbery one. So while we're watching a car, we're sitting there, and I'm following what's going on the other surveillance. And then I hear about how the 3 guys have gotten together. They're in the van that they're always in, and they're meandering around Queens, just no particular destination, just driving around. And I'm sitting there with I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Hagstrom. That was the map we used in the day, Hagstrom Map Company.
Yeah.
It was the days before GPS.
Yeah.
So we would have maps, pages of maps of, I'm talking about with the surveillance team, in case, I mean, a lot of people didn't know where they were going, so they'd have a map so they could find out where they needed to go. So I'm kind of following where the van is going on the map, and kind of planning out, if God forbid I can get off this drug diversion case, how as expeditiously as possible can I get over to the bank robbery scene. And we're listening to the radio transmissions, and the van's moving. And then somebody had come out, I think a wife and a kid came out and got in the car we were watching. So somebody gave the command, and I didn't wait for the last second. Once I heard that our subject didn't get into this car, I knew this one's over, let's go. And I was off and running, listening to the radio, looking where I'm going. Thank God it was in Queens, so I kind of knew where I was going. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to get to the bank robbery probably 30 seconds before it actually happened. And they robbed the bank, got in, agent got into the bank and confirmed that I was robbed. And less than half a mile away, we were able to pinning the van and arrested 3 guys for what was then their 33rd bank robbery.
You know, a friend of mine, you might know him actually, he was telling me that the best film coverage of what it's like to be on a surveillance is that Popeye Doyle movie, and I can't remember the name of it. Remember?
Hackman.
What?
Well, the actor was Gene Hackman. He played Popeye Doyle.
Movie is it's Popeye Doyle. It's
French Connection.
French Connection. He was saying, you know, that when you're standing out there, freezing cold, it's 10 degrees, and you know,
Yeah.
the store owners don't want you in their store because you know, the guy will come and shoot me because I let the cop hide in my store, and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
could be miserable. Let me see if you can, the cover of your book one more time, because we're
Yeah,
approaching.
now that I put the light on, I'm able to see it a little bit better.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So it's just another day, and Jason
Randazzo.
Tandozza.
Yeah, don't believe me. A lot of people, even in New York, have problems with it.
It's going to, the book, a photo of the book, and I got to get a headshot from Jason, will be at the end of this documentary, but I'm also going to make one of my incredibly famous commercials for the, you like my commercials, Paul?
I love them.
I'm getting really good at that. I got to tell you, I've learned how to do a lot of stuff. So I'm going to make a little commercial for Jason's book, and you should buy it. And it's an interesting read about a life well lived. Jason, thank you so much for being.
Oh, thank you. No, I appreciate the time.
Yeah, Paul.
Jason, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Thank you. Take care.
Take care, you guys.
You too.